If you're a beginner DJ, then setting cues in Rekordbox can feel like a bit of a puzzle, but if you don't get to grips with it, you'll be missing out on essential tools that can make your mixing faster, smoother, and more creative. In this video, I'll show you how to set and manage the main, memory, and hot cues step by step. I'm Chris, and on this channel, I teach DJs how to create smarter music libraries and get the most out of their DJ software. It's hard to miss the giant cue button, which is present on almost all DJ gear, but it's actually a bit tricky to get your head around how it works. When the track is paused, pressing the cue button will set the main cue point. You can see Rekordbox has added a little arrow to the track here. Now, when I press and hold the cue button, the track will play from that point. When I release it, the track will stop and rewind to the cue point. It's a bit like gated mode on hot cues. Things work a little differently when the track is actually playing. I've set a main cue point here on the intro and press play. If I press the main cue button now, the track will stop playing and hop back to the intro where I set the cue point originally. So what's the point of this? If you haven't had any time to prepare other cue points in advance, for example if you took a request, then the main cue button is a really useful way of setting a cue. But it's more ad hoc and not something you necessarily want to save for the future. It can also work well if you want to audition some different potential cue points in your headphones before committing to actually setting a hot cue or memory cue. Memory cues are primarily used for playing on club gear like CDJs. And in Rekordbox, most CDJ prep is done in export mode. Swap to export mode in the top left, load up your track, and to the right you'll see a panel. Make sure that's set to the memory tab. You set memory cues in a slightly different and stupid way to hot cues. Find the point in the track you want to set the cue. You then have to set a main cue point. The easiest way to do this is to just press C on the keyboard, and then press the memory button, or M. You'll see your memory cue appear in the list on the right, based on time order, and they can be removed with the small X. To add multiple memory cues, just repeat the process throughout the track. They'll be automatically ordered by time. If you really want to, it can be done in performance mode as well. Switch back to performance mode, change the drop down above the performance pads to memory cue, set a cue where you want the memory cue using the cue button, and then press memory to set the cue. Cycle through memory cues on your gear by pressing the cue or loop call buttons. But the memory cue is quite rigid, and you can only load them in chronological order. If you're a controller DJ, you'll most likely be working with the next kind of cue point. Hot cues are the most flexible kind of cue point, and the one I use most often. Like a memory cue, they allow you to set parts in a track to start from. They've got a few extra superpowers that can really enhance your DJing. You can set up to 16 of them in Rekordbox versus 10 for memory cues. They can be triggered or set while the track is playing, allowing you to jump around your track easily. And you can use them in gated mode, which triggers the hot cue as you hold it down and then stops playback when you release, allowing some interesting effects. You've got a few options for setting hot cues in performance mode. Load the track to the deck and move the playhead to where you want to set the hot cue. You can now simply click on one of the empty slots on the pads underneath to set it. I actually prefer doing this with keyboard shortcuts as it's much faster. The numbers 1 to 4 on your keyboard map to the first 4 hot cue slots on deck 1. That's A, B, C, and D. You can set up to 16 hot cues in performance mode if you really want to, which trust me, you don't. To access the next page of 8 slots, click the little scroll bar underneath. This next bank of 8 hot cues is accessed on your controller using the right and left page arrows, which you'll find near the performance pads. And remember, we can set hot cues when the track is actually playing. So if you want to just listen to the track in its entirety and set hot cues as you go, you can do that. And it also means if you're playing live, they're super easy to set directly from your controller. To remove a hot cue, simply hover over it with your mouse and click the little X. Or on your controller, press Shift and then the hot cue you want to remove. If you're preparing your tracks for CDJs, things might look a little bit different. Swap to export mode at the top left. Under the cue loop tab, you'll see a series of 8 boxes labeled A to H. These are the 8 hot cue slots. Why 8 and not 16? That's because even the most modern CDJs only support up to 8 hot cues. But there's another trick hot cues have up their sleeves: storing and even triggering loops. To do this, set a loop in Rekordbox using the loop icon here. You can change the length to whatever you want using the left and right arrows. Now, if you save a hot cue while the loop is active, that loop will be saved to the hot cue, shown by this little loop icon here. The next time you trigger that hot cue, the loop will be automatically applied. But that's not all this can do. The hot cue can also be used like an automatic trigger. It's called a hot loop. To get this working, set a loop in the same way and save it to a hot cue slot. Then click on the little loop icon. It'll turn red. When the playhead reaches the hot loop, it'll automatically activate it without you having to do anything. This is a real arse saver in some situations, which I covered in another video. But there are actually 4 different ways of thinking about cue points, and each one can help your DJing in different ways. In this video, I talk you through what they are and how you can use them to quickly level up your DJ library.